So I'm really excited about our guest speaker today. His name's Tim Hubbard, and I've had the opportunity to network with him and pick his brain a little bit about short-term rentals. So that's what we'll be discussing: investing and operating short-term rentals remotely. So before we do get started, we need to confess here, NewView, we are a third-party custodian. We are non-fiduciary. It is really up to the clients to do their own due diligence before they make any investment decisions. We always encourage clients to speak with an attorney, a professional financial advisor before they invest their money into any types of deals that they're unsure of. But we do provide lots of education for you, and that's why we bring in our guest speakers. They are the experts. A few other things about NewView. So NewView's been in business 17 years now. Since 2003, we opened our doors and we custody 1.7 billion under client assets. We are located right outside of Orlando, Florida, in Longwood, Florida. And a few things I love to mention about NewView: we are simple to do business with. We are available, we're responsive, and we love to build relationships with you. We're able to do that. We get graded on answering our calls. Not many companies you can call and you get a live person, but here at NewView, that is something we are consistently graded on, and we average 98% of the time that a live person will answer the call with you. If by any chance you get a voicemail, you leave us a message, we'll get right back to you that same day. It's not Saturday and Sunday. We are closed on Saturdays and Sundays. But a few things about Tim. I'm real excited about bringing him on today. Tim started his career in real estate as an investment broker, selling multifamily and commercial properties in Northern California. He worked with a small team of 5 and completed over 2 billion transactions. He has been personally investing in real estate for over 10 years and has acquired a multi-million-dollar portfolio comprised primarily of small multifamily properties in multiple markets. He has also traveled throughout the world, over 70 countries, and stayed in hundreds of short-term rental accommodations. So 5 years ago, he realized that the high returns could be made from converting these properties into their furnished short-term rental and renting them by night versus the long-term rentals. So with that being said, Tim, it's all yours. I'm real excited to hear what you have to say today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Brian. I'm excited to talk about short-term rentals. It's been a big part of my investment portfolio for the last 5 years. So yeah, excited to talk about it. Let's see. Let me go ahead and I can share my screen here. And you can see that okay? Okay. Well, my name's Tim Hubbard, and thanks for the intro, Brian. I'll talk a little bit about my background here, but I have been working in real estate for a long time, but about 5 years ago, I got into short-term rentals. So I want to talk today just about operating Airbnbs, starting Airbnbs, where to find them, what they are, and basically just a little summary about Airbnbs, and then we'll have time for questions and everything, of course. So these are the main points I want to just cover. Why STRs, that's the acronym for short-term rentals, are a great piece for an investment portfolio. I have long-term rentals as well and commercial property, but I think short-term rentals have a really, really nice place in a portfolio. And one of the main reasons is just because they can make a lot of money, 5 times or more per property. And I'll show you guys a couple case studies of my actual properties shortly. So just a little bit about my background, where to find the best short-term rentals, what I look for, passive operations. So a lot of people think that, short-term rentals are super management intensive, and they can be, but they also can be operated passively too. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then a big one are the COVID impacts. I know everyone's, it's been the craziest year for travel, craziest 2 years for travel in my lifetime and in everyone's lifetime. I mean, we've never had a global shutdown like we have. So I'll definitely dig into that and cover that a little bit more too. But the main point of this topic, I guess, is just to let everyone know how we can go from having several properties returning good money just to having one that's returning the same amount of money, basically. And there's a lot of other cool little things that come along with short-term rentals too. So I think everyone's probably heard of short-term rentals by now. So Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, Booking.com has tons of short-term rentals. There's probably not too many people that haven't stayed in one now or have a family member that haven't stayed in one. And we're talking like worldwide. So we'll talk about two big stumbling blocks or things that people maybe find or might be too complicated with Airbnbs. So finding the right properties and that it's too management intensive. So I've been doing this for a long time. And there's tons of research out there. There's tons of ways to do everything. I mean, way more information than we've ever had before. And I've been operating short-term rentals for a long time. So I just wanted to give you a little background on that. I've spent lots and lots of time in short-term rentals. I still travel all the time as much as I can. And I stay in short-term rentals. I stay in hotels as well, but just depends on how long I'm going to be there and the type of place and the type of experience that I'm looking for. That's a big thing with short-term rentals, is that they can offer really unique experiences. So I've traveled a ton around the world, lived in or visited more than 145 cities. And we've managed over 15,000 guests with my properties, with my short-term rentals, which are all in the U.S. And I've been living outside of the U.S. for probably over 3 years now. So just a little bit on my real estate background. Brian talked about it a little bit, but I'm from California originally, Sacramento. I started investing there over 10 years ago. Got a couple degrees in international business, got an MBA from Davis out there. I founded Midtown Stays, which is essentially my company that manages my properties in the States. Definitely traveled a lot. And I usually split my time between Colombia and Brazil. So I just got back I'm actually in Florida right now, looking at some real estate and exploring some opportunities, but I just got back from Brazil the day before yesterday and was down there most of the year. So that's a little bit more about me and how I got started in all this long time ago. I was fortunate to go to Spain in high school on a exchange program, and I just fell in love with the different culture and realized that everywhere is totally different. It has different food and weather and architecture and all these things. And so I've really enjoyed traveling, and that's what got me into real estate, basically looking for a way to have more freedom and to be able to travel. And this was a big help, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you've been in real estate for a while, that was a big influence on me. Basically he says your house is not an asset. So it's always looking for properties as investments and not assets. So the first property I ever invested in was a fourplex. And I renovated the property and, was basically living rent free way back in the day. And I've just kind of done that since. So I did work as a commercial broker. We did about 2 billion in transactions, not 2 billion transactions. But we did about 2 billion in total dollar amount, on a small team. We did apartment buildings and shopping centers and land deals and retail. So I was kind of the underdog, as a younger guy working there, but I learned a ton about all different facets of real estate. So I started from there investing more and more. And eventually I left California and started investing in Tennessee and Oklahoma. Now I own property in a few states and also in Brazil and Colombia. So a little bit about me. So I love short-term rentals because the foundation is real estate. It's cash flow. We can finance the properties, and we can have someone else paying down the debt on properties that we own. So real estate is special because there's multiple ways that we can make money from it. The property can appreciate, which things have been going crazy right now. If you're listening to this in real time, as I'm sure everyone's been seeing with all the money being printed and stuff like that. So appreciation is one way we can make money from cash flow, which is the most conservative way. And that's the way that I'm going to recommend, even with your short-term rentals. We make money from our tenants or our guests in this scenario, paying down our equity. We can make money off the depreciation and the tax benefits. And then if we're leveraging the property, if we have a loan, we can actually fight inflation. So we're making some money there. So real estate, is a great, more people have become wealthy through real estate than any other asset class. And short-term rentals is just another way to do real estate. And I'm really excited about them. I have been since I discovered them. I started with one property just as an experiment. It was in a downtown area that I was going to live in. I was renovating, and I thought, I'm going to put some furniture in here and try this out. And if it works, then I'll just continue it as a short-term rental. But if it doesn't work, then I'll just move into it. So I didn't really see a lot of risk. And that property has been booked just rock solid. Rates have been going up. And then from there, I just started actually looking specifically for properties. So I'll show you some of those here in a little bit. But why I like short-term rentals, I think they're just taking off. I mean, Airbnb just went public. Everyone's becoming familiar with them. I'm going to talk about COVID and how I think a lot of people have discovered Airbnbs for the first time just because of COVID, because they're not staying in the big hotels. But they're also kind of accommodating a new way of living. We have a big digital community now, people working virtual more than ever before. So people can go stay in a property for a month in a different city and just have a totally different way of life and different experience. So I think they're just taking off. But the real reason, I guess, that I got into short-term rentals is just because the returns can be really, really high. So that is the main piece. But it does allow us to, because the returns are higher, it does allow us to look for some properties in areas that might not work as a traditional rental. So it kind of opens some possibilities for us. Let's see. So real estate, like I said, more people have become wealthy through real estate than any other asset class. And short-term rentals for me has just been a way to expedite that. Traditional rentals can take a long time. You get single family home that's maybe making a couple $100 a month cash flow. And you have to add up a lot of those before you're in a comfortable position. Or with short-term rentals, you can get much fewer properties that have much higher returns. And the foundation of them is still real estate. Let's see. So a couple statistics, and this was actually before COVID, but an Airbnb every second, and that's almost a year ago. So we're starting to see travel come back, which is awesome. I'm going to show you my actual numbers, what happened to some of my properties during COVID. It might surprise a lot of you. But Airbnb last year paid out $80 billion to hosts. So people operating Airbnbs, $80 billion, and $1 billion to cities, $1.5 billion in cities in taxes. So cities like this too, they're earning a ton of money from this. And it's money that they're earning without having to do anything. They don't have to hire employees. They don't have to open up new departments. They're earning a lot of revenue. So I know we have a lot of pushback in some areas with Airbnbs in regards to regulations, and I can talk about that too. But I just wanted to point out that we have some states already that are banning the ban of short-term rentals. So Texas, Tennessee, for example, have said you cannot ban short-term rentals. It doesn't mean a city can't regulate them, but they've gone on a statewide basis to protect short-term rentals. So I think that's really, really powerful. Airbnb is poised to be the #1 hotel taxpayer in the world. So another, thing that's very important with any investment really is just having backup strategies, and a few backup strategies that we can use with short-term rentals. If they don't work out for whatever reason, is just to rent them long-term. You know, the properties I'm going to recommend are in areas that make sense as traditional real estate investments without the short-term piece. But when we add it on top, we'll make a lot more. But for some reason that didn't work out, we can go back to renting them long-term. We can rent to professionals, you know, over 30-day stays. Most regulations in the US are for stays less than 30 days. So if we run over that, usually there's no issue. So you can rent to traveling nurses, you know, people, college students, all types of things. And then, you know, if we wanted to sell a property, it's going to look amazing, right? We're going to have amazing photos for it. It's in tip-top shape because we've been operating as an Airbnb. So we have several exit strategies. But then also what happens if the economy crashes, if there's a downturn? Well, real estate's different in every market and every submarket, and every property is different. And in downturns, historically, you know, when there's a recession and people don't have all the disposable money or disposable income, they go from really expensive properties and maybe they step down to a Class B or even a Class C property. And so sometimes in recessions, we can actually see those property rents go up. And so if we're getting the right properties from the beginning, we'll have that as a backup strategy if there's a downturn in the economy, if there's a recession. So how do we find these properties? I'm going to kind of blow through this real quick, just to make sure we have more time for questions. But I'll give you one little tip that I use just to kind of shortcut all this research. Basically, you know, what makes a good property market is based on the numbers, right? And we know these numbers. We know this is a good book that I read called Big Shifts Ahead. Talks about demographic changes. Basically says how we can calculate these changes. So we have government, economic conditions, societal shifts, and technological advances. If we couple those with the different stages of people's lives, we can determine where they're going, how much money they will spend, who they will live with, what purchases they'll make. But the most important one for us, if we're investing in real estate, is where they will live and spend their money. So, you know, there is actual data behind that, and we can find it all over the internet with moving patterns and stuff like that. So that's what I do, and those are the markets that I look for. But in a nutshell, those are markets with strong population growth, low cost of living, strong employment growth, and diverse employment. You know, so if big industry goes out and you have rentals there that, you know, they don't get hit too hard, and then friendly landlord-tenant laws. And I found that the states that have friendly landlord-tenant laws are also usually a lot more friendly towards short-term rentals. This is just a map. I mean, we know that a lot of people have been moving from the colder Northeast and places down into Florida and Texas and Tennessee and into the Sun Belt. So this is just a chart showing some of that movement. I think we've seen, you know, a lot of that even expedited with a lot of the things that COVID caused. But that trend is continuing. So the easiest way to find these markets, I know it's a ton of research. You can do it on your own. It's available. It's out there. But I found a little trick is basically just following turnkey providers. So turnkey provider in the real estate world, someone that buys usually a single family property, they renovate it, they sell it to an investor with a long-term tenant already in there, and they're making money on the property. So usually those turnkey properties are not in markets, or they have to be in a market that makes sense for the turnkey operator. So, you know, buying in downtown LA, for example, they're not gonna be able to buy a house and rent it out for more than the payments and all the bills and everything. So these tend to be in some of those states that I was referring to in the Sun Belt, in the place with low cost of living, no state income tax. So that's been a big trick for me, is just to start there. Now that's just a starting place. And we know that just because we find a good market doesn't mean that the submarket is good. And this is really, really important when we get into short-term rentals, because one property can perform really well next to a property that doesn't perform well. So we have to make sure that we're in a good submarket. And then from there, we have to make sure we're in a good neighborhood, one that doesn't have regulations and things like that. So we really have to narrow it down. But starting with some of those things, I found can save you a lot of time. And a lot of the biggest challenges I've seen with short-term rentals have come in areas with the biggest housing shortages. And then that makes sense because we have more people pushing back. And you also have hotels historically pushing back much more because they have a greater command on that area, and their rates are higher because there is a housing shortage. So, those are places like, the Bay Area in California, and I'm from California. Hopefully I don't knock on it too much. And I still have property there. One that I'll show you here in a few minutes. But I found for short-term rentals, places, that don't have as bad a housing shortages are going to be really good options. So we have to consider regulations when we're investing with short-term rentals. And they really, you can have one city with dozens of different regulations because it's not just a city level, and it's not just a county level, but it can go down to a neighborhood level. So we really have to make sure if we're going to invest in a property that we want to turn into a short-term rental, that it is allowed to be operated as a short-term rental. But that's pretty easy to do these days. We can basically just Google it. We can call the county and find out very quickly. So I think it's best to find a city that already has some rules around short-term rentals. That way there's no, that way already. And it's going to be a lot safer. And ideally a place where you can actually just get a permit. That's the best way. If there's no regulations, it doesn't mean it's not going to be a fantastic short-term rental. It just means that there may be a potential for the laws to change in the future. So if we know them in advance, that's going to make it a lot more safer, I guess, less risk for us if something were to change. But as a backup plan, if you were in an area and the laws changed, you can rent over 30 days. Usually, I have lots of rentals that we rent over 30 days at nightly rates, and they're not considered short-term rentals anymore. So that's a good strategy. And, it also comes down to the enforcement. These laws, like I said, I'm from California. They've had strict laws depending on the city on short-term rentals for a while. They actually, when I first started, they didn't have any laws there. Then they created them. I was trying to be really proactive and get permits, but their process took like months and months. The reality is they just didn't have people to enforce it. So I'm not recommending anything, but sometimes, the regulations aren't as enforced. So if you have a property that's in an area already, I guess you could try it, but ideally you have a place where you already know the laws, you have a permit, and then going forward in the future, there's not going to be any more risk there. So a couple other things you have to consider too, just around the regulations is just that your neighbors are okay with it. Now, if you have a permit, then the neighbors technically wouldn't have a final say in that. But the properties I recommend are usually not in neighborhoods, although we can do short-term rentals all sides of the spectrum. You've probably seen treehouse short-term rentals or boats all the way up to the giant 20,000 square foot mansion and everything in between. But the short-term rentals that I look for make sense when I run the numbers on them as a long-term rental. So I start with the long-term rental, the cash flow from the tenants at market rates as a long-term rental, cover all my expenses on the property, and then I convert it to a short-term rental. So that's my ultimate backup plan. And that we can only do by just making sure we run the numbers. And when you're looking for a short-term rental, I highly, highly recommend just stay in some properties in the neighborhood that you're looking for. You'll get a real good feel for your competition, but you might also meet a manager that wants to manage your property or a housekeeper that can help you do the housekeeping. So Just a couple tips on the regulations there. And I kind of mentioned on this before, the one property next to another property can perform way better. And there's multiple reasons for that. One, obviously, it's just the property and how it's designed and set up. But a couple other things when it comes to short-term rentals. I mean, we have to make sure we have good reviews. That's the lifeblood of the short-term rental business. So starting our Airbnbs, we got to make sure they're perfect. And those beginning reviews will really help us stay high in the search rankings. Airbnb has their superhost status. It's kind of hard to determine how important that really is. I have lots of properties now, and Airbnb is not really set up to manage multiple properties. So what ends up happening when you scale is you have multiple Airbnb profiles, and it's really hard to keep superhosts if you're doing hundreds, thousands of reservations, because they're set up for like individual properties basically. But if you have superhosts, that can help. Themes and design can help. And we saw a huge growth in smaller cities outside, big cities, especially during COVID. But another reason I like the smaller cities is the prices are usually a little better too. So maybe not, the dense markets, but a city that has 500,000 people, I think is a pretty safe place to be. So how are we doing on time here? A lot of people, their big hurdle to short-term rentals is, they think there's a lot of management that goes into it, and there can be, but it can also be really, really passive. As I mentioned, all my properties are in the US, and I've lived outside the US for years. And we have great reviews. So it really comes down to our team, and we have some options and some things that can really help manage the properties for us, help manage the pricing, help do everything, every step of the way. The industry's really come a long way in the last 5 years. I mean, we have software that can, smart home technology, all these things. So it's never been easier than now to operate an Airbnb remotely. So a couple options for management. We can just hire a vacation rental company or a short-term rental manager. They can handle everything. Airbnb has a thing called co-host, where you can kind of share your property with someone else, or we can hire our own team in-house. And we can use VAs to help with guest reception, and we can use some of these software tools to help make things passive. So that's what I do. But I've been doing this for a while. So starting out, might be easier to just work with a co-host or something like that. But regardless, I think these management software tools, everyone should be using if they have a short-term rental. They really, really help. So what do they do exactly? Well, they'll help us combine calendars from multiple listing sites, Airbnb and HomeAway and all these different sites, so that we can put them in one calendar and we don't have duplicate reservations or anything like that. They can answer messages for us. They can process payments for us. They'll provide all the check-in information and the checkout information and pictures, and really every step of the way. We can use some of this software to help us with our housekeeping. A lot of the software does SMS text now, and it'll go directly through the channel or email. So we use a digital guidebook, for example, that sends out automatically to all of our guests, and it has all the information that they need to find in the property. The biggest step to automating all this, though, of course, is just having a way for your guests to check in without someone actually meeting them there. So that's digital door locks. And now we have Nest cameras, so we can put those on the front door and check to make sure that, we have 2 people showing up for reservation of 2 and not 20 or something like that. So I'm kind of blowing through this, but I want to save some time for questions. I'll jump through this COVID stuff real quick and show you a couple case studies, and then we can get into some questions. So this is a property I have in Sacramento still. It's a 4-plex, and this is the revenue from the last, 2 years. So from April to April. So you can see it's quite high. I mean, And this is much, much higher than what the long-term rents would be. I would say probably, 4 times. The average unit there's making $3,500 to $4,000 a month, and it's a fourplex. So, or even more than that sometimes. But you can see here, COVID, it did dip. And this is in California where regulations were high. So we dropped in March, which was our worst month, I would say, down to 7,000, which if I was renting this fourplex on a long-term rental, they're small units. I might be earning 6,000 or 6,500. So in the worst month that I've ever had, in the worst month in history for travel, in my lifetime, it was still earning a little more than what it would have on a long-term basis. You can see it's bounced back quite a bit. And I'm expecting, as travel comes back, this is without international travel too. So when that comes back, I think that we're going to see a huge surge. Some of the things that happened, we had a lot of hotels close. We had a lot of short-term rental operators close too, mainly the ones that were doing a lease arbitrage model, which is basically someone renting an apartment and subleasing it out and making the difference. A lot of them were operating in big urban areas, which got hit the hardest. So we saw a lot of short-term rental operators leave. So there's actually less supply than there was, but that's quickly coming back up. Just some stats for some hotels that just got crushed. And a lot of reason people were staying in short-term rentals still is they had private access. They didn't have common elevators and common areas, and they were actually allowed to operate still, where hotels, kind of got the short end of the stick and weren't allowed to stay open in some cases. So, other obvious trends, we have more people working remotely than ever before. And a lot of those people are not going back to office areas. So we have people staying longer or staycations in properties because they don't have to show up to an office anymore. So in our rentals, we want to make sure we have office space for them to be able to work. That's a big tip. Party proofing, there's tons of ways to make sure that we don't have parties in there. This is a big scare for a lot of people, but I would say, after accommodating thousands of guests, we've never had anything super crazy happen. I mean, we've had a TV stolen or, maybe a hole in the wall and some things like that, but there's lots of ways to combat, potentially bad guests in your property. So little COVID summary, hotels got hit hard. That's obvious. People are moving away from dense urban areas. Now, we don't know if that's temporary. It's probably temporary, although, not 100% of people are going to move back into those dense cities. More people working remotely. We had a lot of shadow demand. So people, a lot of divorces and roommates breaking up. They were having to work at home. And so anytime something like that happens, people split up, it actually creates double the demand. So some interesting things happening because of COVID. But some of the opportunities from that, we have longer reservations. So people are staying longer, which means less housekeeping, less operations for us. We have lower hotel occupancy. More people are starting to stay in short-term rentals. Some areas we actually have higher daily rates because there's less supply and people have left. Less available rentals. And then we know that international travel is going to open up again. Most of travel now is a lot of drive-to destinations, although things are pretty open in the US now for flights and stuff. So some of the opportunities. Okay, let's get into the fun stuff. So here's a case study. This was one of my most recent ones that I just launched maybe like 6 months or so ago. Just a little floor plan. This place is tiny. It's like 400 square feet. It's in a 6-unit apartment building. Here's a picture of the front door. It's got a private entrance. We have Netflix and all of them, but it's really simple. I don't even have a full kitchen in this place, but it's enough for someone to stay there on an extended stay. This is basically a little studio, little workspace. It has laundry, and this is the front of the building. So it's not anything fancy, special. This one happens to be in Memphis. And here's some of the numbers. I bought the building for $325,000. It's a 6-unit apartment building. I bought it I guess it's been 2 years ago now, but it had long-term tenants in it. And I put a lot of money into it, renovating units and stuff. But before, when I had the long-term tenants, it was maybe making around $600 a month. Now that's if there were no major repairs or anything like that. So I changed the property. I have 2 short-term rentals in there now, and the other 4 are long-term rentals, which I kept as long-term rentals because I don't think they fit as well as short-term rentals. Happy to answer why later on, but just with those 2 short-term rentals, I mean, it's making over $4,000 a month now. The building, all 6 units, so with the long-term tenants, but much, much higher. I mean, those rents went up 4 or 5 times the long-term rents. So I do have more expenses in that, obviously. I have to buy furniture and things like that. But for the amount invested here and the return, you just you don't find these numbers very often anywhere. And in the end of the day, this is a good property with good fundamentals, good long-term rental fundamentals as well. Here's another one. This is one I did a while back. This was actually the first one I did when I left California, but I also put a lot of money into this one. And it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to do a big value add project. There's a million different ways to start and run a short-term rental. But just to show you some of the numbers on this one, I bought it for $270, put almost $200,000. It was a huge project. I wouldn't do a big project like this again, but it's doing very, very well. They're all short-term rentals. There's 8 of them. They're smaller apartments. You can see some of the returns. I mean, over 50% cash on cash returns after it's operating. It's a short-term rental. You just can't find stuff like that. And this is that revenue for the last 2 years, I guess. I wanted to show you this because of COVID too. We had a slump again in March and April, but you can see it's already starting to bounce back up. And this isn't a property, so the lowest month here, it looks like, a little over 10,000. This is in a property, these 8 units needed a lot of work. They had long-term tenants in there, and it was maybe earning $4,000 or $5,000 a month with the eight tenants. It needed a ton of work though, like I said. So in the worst month in history for the travel industry, it's still doing over twice as well as it was with long-term tenants. And it's coming back. It's bouncing back. So that was in a nutshell, a little bit about short-term rentals, some of the opportunities, some of the COVID impacts, what I do to find properties, and some essential software. I think, Brian, we can, hopefully we've got plenty of time for questions. These are some other topics, in regards to the questions, financing and furnishing and, how to set up the listings and stuff like that. So lots we can talk about. Hopefully we've got a few questions.
Yeah, if anybody has questions, go ahead and start typing those in the Q&A, and we're going to go ahead and attack those questions right now. Tim, thank you so much for spending some time with us and talking to us about your experience with Airbnbs. I know this is definitely a hot topic, and a lot of people aren't sure even how to get started in the first place. I know I'm one of those. That's why I originally reached out to you. All right, so you ready for some questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the questions is, and this was in the chat, do you own any Airbnbs in Brazil?
I own a property in Brazil that I'm renovating right now. And it will work fabulously as an Airbnb, but I haven't started with it yet. And I'm, it's kind of, I didn't buy it strictly as an investment. So, but, part of my research down there, I'm staying in Airbnbs, looking into the real estate market. I met a property manager that can potentially manage it for me. I met 2 housekeepers. So I was basically able to meet my whole team in case that I do rent it out as a short-term rental. So,
why do you think that some counties still don't allow Airbnbs?
Yeah, good question. So, the places, well, some states are more conservative or liberal than others. I think that does have an impact. As I mentioned, I think the states that are a little more landlord friendly tend to be a little more friendlier with Airbnbs. But usually when we see restrictions, it's probably started because of hotels, hotel lobbyists, or if it's in a nicer neighborhood, a lot of times you're going to get pushback from neighbors. And so if they go to the city, then they can create their own regulations. But it really is on a neighborhood level. I mean, you might have a whole city that allows it and you have, a few neighborhoods that don't. So it's pretty easy to find out these days just by Googling.
Yeah, for sure. I know in my experience, like if there's a lot of hotels around in that county, they usually don't allow it. But if you go a little further into more of the like suburbs of those beach towns, usually the beaches, then they allow the Airbnbs. You kind of got to go so far away from the hotels, I guess.
Yeah.
But I would think it would help the tourism and build the economy having more, Airbnbs available for people instead of the hotels, especially during the pandemic. But that's,
No, it definitely does. And, it's interesting to see I still stay in a lot of hotels, and hotels are changing. I mean, they're building their hotels like Airbnbs now. A lot of them are, they're having little studio concepts or boutique hotels because they know people are staying longer. And so, yeah, they're kind of converging the two a little bit.
Would you invest in a property that had an HOA?
I would prefer not to, because HOAs can change, at any time. And those are usually, in a condominium place where you have long-term neighbors. I would if they had some sort of policy that was in place that allowed short-term rentals. And some condo associations have that. If you're buying in a very historically vacation rental type place, a lot of those condominiums might have those already in place. But if there's no policy with short-term rentals already in place, I would prefer a property that didn't have HOA.
Okay, let's see. Next question here. For deliveries and other physical presence issues, who is the primary contact for the property? The housekeeper, cleaner, handyman, or contractor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. So we can handle almost everything virtually except our housekeeping and our maintenance. So, you can do it multiple ways. You can have a housekeeper that also helps you with management, and if you're using one of these software systems, you can easily share guest contacts and the message system and the calendar and things like that. It depends on how many properties you have in an area too. I mean, if you only have a couple properties, then you're probably not going to hire like a full-time manager or something, right? But if you start getting more properties, then you can hire a manager that kind of oversees everything. That's what I've done. But in the areas where I don't have as many properties, I just work with the housekeepers. We work with the housekeepers.
Okay, that's easy enough.
Yeah.
What are some common restrictions for your properties to alleviate partying and unwanted guests?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot. And COVID, one of the most challenging things with COVID was that we went from getting guests from far away to getting local guests because people were traveling. They weren't traveling far away anymore. And before that, we wouldn't even allow local guests because it's, if someone's renting your apartment out and they're from the same city, there's some reason why they're doing that, right? It's and a lot of times that was because they want to have a party. And so the first step is just having requirements set up. So, you can require that they have positive reviews before they make a reservation. That's an Airbnb thing. You can require that they have, verified ID. But then you can take it a step further and you can have, a rental agreement, and you can set that up through your guidebooks that they can agree to through there, or your property management system where they can sign. But then there's all kinds of smart home tech now too. So we have like the Nest cameras, for example, where you can see how many people are actually going in your property. You can have exterior security cameras. They actually have noise monitoring devices now that you can just put right in the property. And if it goes over a certain decibel, it can notify whoever's helping you manage. So there's a lot of things. Also your minimum night stay. We just do 2-night minimums now. We used to do 1 nights, but that can have an impact. the rate that you're charging for a property can also have an impact. There's a lot of things that you can do, but you can definitely prevent them.
Okay, some good best practices there. What do you think performs better, investments in the city or in the suburbs?
That's a hard question to answer because it's really real estate really depends on the market.
What city?
And your occupancy is going to depend on supply and demand. So if that suburb happened to be some hot spot that everyone loved going to all the time, it might outperform the city, but it really comes down to supply and demand. And there are tools that can help us determine supply and demand as well. There's one called airdna.co, and I use that to evaluate properties before buying anything. You can see historic data, you can see occupancies, you can see all the neighboring available rentals. You can see seasonal trends. Some places are seasonal and some aren't really. Big cities can usually, aren't as seasonal if they have people traveling for work, but we've seen a decrease in work travelers. So really depends on supply and demand, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So airdna.co.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Awesome. That's a great tool. What would you suggest somebody that's trying to find their first furnished property and how they can make it happen?
I would start, it depends, if, I think it's easier than ever to buy property in places that we don't live, and the place that we live is usually not the best place to invest. There's hundreds and hundreds of markets. It doesn't mean, a lot of people say, live where you want to live and invest where it makes the most sense. Right. So, I kind of take that global view first and just look at certain states that are doing better, more people moving to, and I start there, and then narrow down on, a city or a neighborhood from there that kind of meets some of that criteria, meets your price point, the size of the property. So I guess you got to know how much you're looking to invest. And then, yeah, that's, there's a few steps to that process, I guess. I don't know if that helps answer that or not.
No, that was definitely good. Some good strategy there. About how many properties do you own total that are Airbnb?
I own 31 that are Airbnb, but I've actually just added 10 that I'm doing the lease arbitrage model. So an owner came to me in a city where I'm already operating, and it seemed like a really good opportunity. So I guess operating 41 and I own 31 currently.
Somebody's requesting that you spell that. What was it? airdna.co, right? airdna.co.
Yeah, airdna.co. Yeah.
There you go. Thanks for putting it in the chat.
Yeah.
All right. Is it hard to get financing for a property that is owned in a self-directed IRA? I can answer that one for you. So the only type of financing you can partner with a self-directed IRA is a non-recourse loan. We do have a list of non-recourse lenders. Typically, when you're using your IRA with a non-recourse loan, they do ask that you have a decent chunk of the total value of the property up front. It is cash, of course, because you're using an IRA, but that's something you can discuss, one-on-one, because every lender is going to be different. They're going to have different qualifications and they're going to offer different rates. So reach out to myself and I can provide you that list, and you can definitely talk to them and see what your budget is and what you can find. Did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I guess I was just thinking in terms of IRAs, if someone's looking to invest a smaller amount, I think condominium short-term rentals can work out well, and you can buy those individually, as opposed to buying like a multifamily property, which is kind of a lower purchase value a lot of times. But that might be an easier entry point, that's already in a condominium area that's ran by a vacation rental company. You could always change the management structure, later on, but that might be an easier route to getting started.
Okay, this is a tough question here. Can you talk about how the offshore short-term rental is different with regulations and legal setup management? Do you need to have an LLC or a trust?
Mm-hmm. So every country is different, just like every city is different. I can tell you in Medellin and Colombia, where I've spent a lot of time and I have property there also. They're very strict with short-term rentals, very strict. There's only a few properties. One of the reasons is because they're all condominium buildings for the most part. And you have to have like over 50% of the owners agree to allow short-term rentals or something. Otherwise they could, so they have a lot of trouble. It's not an easy place. And then having an LLC, yeah, everything just totally changes when you cross the border. I mean, the legal, all of that, but I think there's good opportunities, abroad too.
Yeah, definitely what I've seen with my clients is, a lot of clients buy things in Belize, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, but none of them are the same. Every country is different. Some require you have a business entity, so you have to create that LLC. Some don't require that at all. Some require that you're even a resident of that country in order to purchase real estate there. So, every country is going to be different. You just kind of have to reach out. A real estate attorney in that country is usually a pretty good resource for that.
Definitely. Yeah. Attorneys outside of your home country are fabulous resources for sure. And if they specify in real estate, that's even better.
Okay, what percent monthly occupancy do you use when evaluating a property's potential for short-term rental?
So I would say when I run the numbers on a potential property that I want to see at least 3 times gross rent than what it's making. And so that would factor in my occupancy, and I'll kind of determine my occupancy based on comparable properties, that I might find in AirDNA, and you can see history on that. But I would usually say, I would maybe plug in a 70% occupancy, and with that and my expected nightly rates, that it's at least 3 times over what the long-term rents are. I probably wouldn't spend more time looking at it.
Okay, good info. Which brands of software do you prefer?
I use a ton of tools, and I'm always changing them. I use Guest with a Y, for a long time. They have really, really good management software. And they also have their own receptionists that you can hire to handle all of your questions. And so I use that for really up until now. I've just hired my own virtual team for receptionists, and I'm using another platform called Hostaway. So that's another management option, but there's a ton of them now. So if you only have a few properties, Smart B&B is a really good one. It's very common. It's inexpensive, easy to use. We use Hostfully, it's called, which does our digital guidebooks, and that helps us automate a lot. We use a company. We automate our pricing every day, so it fluctuates based on demand and occupancy and seasonality, day of the week, all this thing. And that's called pricelabs.co. There's several companies that do that also. Those are the main, I'd say those are probably the main software components that we use, aside from smart home tech like smart door locks and stuff.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered this question, but how do you party proof a rental?
Yeah. It starts with your requirements for your guests. So, setting that up, make sure you verify them. You can also have deposits, check your minimum night stay. And after that, things you can do at the house, the smart home tech, the cameras, the noise monitors. So yeah, a lot of things.
I had a client tell me, don't buy an Airbnb close to a college campus because it's guaranteed to be destroyed.
Yeah. It just really just comes down to making sure that, it's good to ask your guests why they're coming, why they're staying at your rental. If they say, oh, I'm there for, my buddy's bachelor party. Well, that's, that's a red flag.
And you can deny it, right? If you wanted to.
Yeah, you can. It depends. So if if you're uncomfortable with someone that's going to stay in your property, you just message Airbnb and say, hey, I asked them why they're coming to town. They said they're having a party. We don't allow parties, and I'm uncomfortable with it. And so the Airbnb will jump in and handle that. Depends on which listing sites you're using. Some of them you could just cancel yourself. So kind of depends, but yeah, there's definitely ways to manage all that.
Okay, so I think you kind of mentioned this with the software that you use, but how do you decide what your nightly rate should be and when prices change?
Yeah, we use software. It's called pricelabs.co. It just plugs right in your Airbnb listing. And it's really, really easy, actually. You just set some parameters like what's the highest charge, what's the lowest charge that you would like. You can adjust it day of the week. It really lets you adapt a lot, and it updates automatically. So every day they update our prices.
Okay, this is a more of a scenario type question here. I'm interested in buying a small house in western location of Wyoming where I can spend part of the summer, and it would because the weather's great, basically. This would be an area that has some tourism due to national parks, but might be hard to fill in the winter months. How much does tourism potential play in your analysis of a property?
So all my properties are in cities that have population over 500,000 people. So tourism helps a ton, but it's not the only type of guests that we get at the properties. We get business guests also. So, purely vacation rentals or purely tourist type rentals can do extremely well. They might do enough in that high season to cover the whole year, and you're not worried about anything. You know what I mean? But you just have to consider, I guess, look at it on an annual basis and see if that number makes sense for you, knowing that slow season, could potentially be slow and harder to fill.
Could you potentially keep I guess it's still a short-term tenant for like 6 months and then Airbnb it the other 6 months of the year? Can you do that?
Yeah, you can do it however you want. It's basically you can change your schedule requirements at any time. You just change the calendar.
All right. Do you ever use VRBO?
Yeah, we use VRBO a lot. They're connected in. They own HomeAway now, so VRBO and HomeAway, and our management software puts our properties in those platforms as well. So if we get a reservation from VRBO, it blocks the calendar, so Airbnb can't book it. Yeah, definitely use VRBO.
What benefits do you see buying real estate in Florida?
I mean, Florida has a lot going for it. Population growth, employment growth. You guys have no state income tax here?
There's no state tax.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a huge incentive. We have a lot of our demographic is entering retirement ages, and they're looking for lower cost of living. They're also looking for warmer weather. So Florida's been fantastic for that, and they've, so yeah, I've been looking a lot in Florida. I'm here right now, actually.
Yeah, I just saw a news article that says Orlando, Florida actually was rated the #2 destination for travel this summer. So
it's also open during COVID stuff, so that might have something to do with that. But no, I think Florida is a great option. Texas, Arizona, Tennessee, Wyoming, and there's lots of places.
Are you available for someone to contact you for financing information?
For finance, so I guess I forgot to share. I have a podcast that I talk a lot about these topics. They're short, 10, 15-minute topics specifically on real estate, but with a big focus on short-term rentals. It's called the Short-Term Rental Riches Podcast. It's on iTunes and all that stuff. And I definitely have several episodes talking about financing. And I can offer some recommendations, but I have another website, Rest Methods. You can contact me through there. Actually, you could contact me through either one. And yeah, I'd be happy to talk about my experiences with them. I mean, I'm doing
On your site, do you have a list of all the softwares that you use somewhere on there?
I will very, very soon. We have it. It's almost ready. Not just the software that we use, but also a lot of the products, like which door locks and smart tech, and then just some other resources that I follow in the short-term rental world. And so, yeah, those are on the restmethods.com website. So yeah, I can find a lot of good info on there, but you can also contact me through either of those. We have a contact page on there. So.
Yeah, there you go, guys. Stay tuned. So all of you asking about the software that he's using, he's going to post that pretty soon, but his podcast is great. You can learn a lot if you're looking to short-term rental. And if you have questions on the IRA parts, reach out to myself and we can always talk about that one-on-one, of course. All right. So we have one last question. Do you offer any specific amenities?
I mean, all of the pretty standard ones, really. I mean, everyone offers, of course, really high speed internet now. That's super important. We do have Netflix. We have coffee and tea. Our kitchens have basic like salt, pepper, olive oil, and the basic cooking utensils. If we have laundry there, we provide the laundry soap. We provide bath soap and towels and all that stuff, obviously, too. But we don't provide anything outside of that, like wine or, food or anything else like that. Okay. Well, Tim, thank you again so much for spending time with us. I know you're super busy and you got a lot going on, but I really appreciate you, spending some time putting this presentation together, answering a lot of questions that we had. I'd love to bring you back again in the future, maybe for a conference that we'll have. We get a lot of attendees there, and this is a really hot topic. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. If anyone has any questions on self-directed IRAs, feel free to reach out to me directly. My direct email is bmartinez@newviewira.com. My direct phone number, 407-519-9172. The first 10 people listening today that email me will get their $50 application fee waived. And if you'd like to download our free e-guide, all you have to do is text 484848. That's the number. Text SDIRA, your first name, your last name, and you can download our free self-directed IRA e-guide there. All right. Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate it. And we'll be in touch soon. Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye. We'll see you next time.